On behalf of the Board of Trustees, I know Karen Kirchman's out of town today, our board president, wanted to thank you for your generosity in giving to the mission of Unity of Indianapolis. Back about 3 weeks ago, we put out an appeal pointing out that revenues have been kind of weak for about 3 months, and that we wanted to raise $15,000 in addition to what our normal giving is on any particular Sunday. And we've actually raised $6,000 in the last few weeks, so thank you very much. Last week we did an Adopt-A-Bill program. I know the flyers, I see I've got one up here, are still out there by the minister's office. And the envelope to put, if you wanted to adopt a bill, to write a check and put it in the envelope next to the church office, which is just adjacent to the book and gift store. Obviously, it seems like so many people this week were touched by what happened on Wednesday night in Charleston, South Carolina, and I wanted to say a few words about that before I proceeded with the Father's Day lesson that I had been working on for a few weeks. First of all, there is an emotion and a thought that seems painful, might even seem negative, but it is actually a very positive and healthy thought and emotion, and that is sorrow. Being willing to grieve. I know next to the office I put out the grief cards that I usually give people at funerals and memorial services, so if you're finding yourself having difficulty dealing with this, by all means pick one of those up. But it's all right to grieve. And the 5 layers of grief are first either shock or denial. And then there's anger, bargaining, sadness, depression, guilt. And then finally you get to that last layer, which is acceptance, and taking a new approach to the situation. And it's interesting that when we have a situation like we had in Charleston, South Carolina, chaos, just an absolute travesty of what we hold dear, it gives us an opportunity to move into something healthier, to move to a higher level of thinking as a society. Anytime we have conflict, it can be a healthy thing provided the parties involved are willing to dig deep and look at what their true needs are. The young man who would like me to speak his name this morning said he wanted to start a civil war. So it calls upon us to do exactly the opposite. Be willing to call out hatred when we see it. It was stunning to hear that his roommate had heard him in recent weeks talking about doing something like this, but he just dismissed it as false bravado. I know back when the Sandy Hook shooting happened right out there in the foyer, someone who had been attending semi-regularly at the church made the comment, well, if all of the teachers in the school had guns, this wouldn't have happened. And I called him out on that. I said, that's ridiculous. There's no way that we should have guns in schools. There's no way we should walk around with a gun on our hips, living in fear every moment of our lives. We are the home of the brave, not the home of the cowardly. So there are 2 polar opposites that each of us have to embrace from moment to moment, from day to day, and that is love or fear. Love or fear. Some people say, well, isn't it love and hate? No, hate is a reaction to fear. This young man was in fear. I'll take him at his word that a few years ago, he was lured to white supremacy sites on the websites and started to digest all of this crap. And that's why it's important for us to teach our children well, to call people out gently but firmly when we hear things that we know are not what we want to be. Because we're going to get whatever we focus on. So we need to focus on the love and be able to build a consciousness of love so strongly that when someone veers off and embraces fear and wants to express it in hatred, that it is absorbed by the love. It isn't allowed to grow any farther than just that initial thought. So I encourage you, as good Unity Truth students, in the coming days, lift the conversation up beyond the silliness of whether he was mentally ill or not. He was conditioned. He was conditioned, and it's up to us as a society to be willing to move forward and upward from this ridiculousness. Now, occasionally when I'm doing Unity orientation or when someone's here for the first time, they ask me, what is the meaning of the name Unity? Our denomination was founded in the 1880s by Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. And they actually started out writing a little newsletter called Modern Thought. Yet Charles realized that there was something that was missing there. And so in meditation, he was kind of asking, what should we call this thing, this growing movement that we're starting there in Kansas City, Missouri? And it came to him, Unity. Not with any grand explanations, but we've noticed over the years how unity is kind of like a person looking at a fine abstract art piece. We see in it what we want to see in it. We have, of course, the unity between you and me. We have the unity between you and me and everybody else in the world. We have the unity between us and God. There is no separation between us and God. We may be asleep to the fact that we're connected, but there is no separation. And that is the great truth of the ages in all of the spiritual traditions, and that is that there is a oneness, there is a wholeness to all of this. The root of the word religion means to bind together again, or to link back. But of course, with religion can come religious abuse. And so many of us have experienced that earlier in our life and turned away from religion. And yet we find that it can be very hard to turn away from spirituality. And that's because we're already spiritual beings having a human experience. In the first book of the Bible, Genesis, first chapter, 26th verse, God says, "Let us make man in our image and after our likeness." Let us make man in our image and after our likeness. I remember once hearing a Unity minister who was saying, sometimes I stand in front of a mirror in the morning and look at it and says, why does God want to look like me? God made us in the image and likeness of a creative individual who can express a divine idea. And there's a repeated theme throughout the Hebrew scriptures, which are more commonly known as the Old Testament, and that is that a human being forgets his or her oneness with God. So he or she goes off away from God, away from that awareness, and has an unpleasant experience, a crisis of some sort, and then finally the realization comes, oh, wait a minute, I remember, and willing to go back to that awareness of God. Jesus in the Gospel of John, 10th chapter, 30th verse, said the words, I and the Father are one. And over the last 1900 years, there are many denominations that think that Jesus was talking about himself and God. When in reality, I believe, as does virtually everyone in Unity, that when Jesus said, I and the Father are one, he was giving us an affirmation to say, a prayer for ourselves to say, I and the Father are one. Yes, you and the Father are one. Recognizing that the word Father was actually translated from the original Greek and Hebrew. It really meant papa, in other words, a beloved figure. So if you did have, say, an abusive father figure in your life, I can understand how sometimes I and the Father are one could make you bristle. Unity has a different approach to the Bible. Of course, there are a lot of people who want to take the Bible literally, but as many of us like to point out, if you're taking the Bible literally, you'll find that many places in the Bible it contradicts itself. There are some books, especially in the Hebrew Scriptures, in which there's one book and then there's a counterpoint after it. So which is it? Even in the four Gospels, they can't agree as to was Jesus crucified on Thursday or Friday. So some of the stories make absolutely no sense in the Bible, and some stories do make some sense. And there's a story that I've touched on several times since Carla and I started, the ministry here at Unity of Indianapolis, or I should say our ministry, our tenure, and that is the story of the prodigal son. And this morning I want to drill a little deeper and really focus, on this, on the story of the prodigal son. But in my Anchorman's earpiece, we're getting some breaking news. In fact, this just in, we have a breaking news in Martinsville. We're going to go to our reporter on the scene, Juan Levitt. Juan?
Yes, Bob, Juan Levitt in Martinsville. Our viewers may remember that we had a story out of Martinsville last year where there was a farming family, the Williams family, and they had two sons, Jake and his younger brother, Matt. Matt, upon graduating from high school, made a request to his father to forego dying and simply give Matt his inheritance at that point. The newsworthy part of this story was that the father went along with that idea. In fact, here is what that father had to say last year.
Yep. My youngest son had decided to just up and go, and I thought, well, who am I to stand in his way? So I sold off half of the land, a couple of combines, and some other equipment, and gathered up all the money, and I gave it to him and sent it on his merry way.
Now, Matt made his way out to Los Angeles, California. Without realizing how high the cost of living was out there, he squandered that money pretty quickly and had to end up going to work. Being unfortunately not skilled at much besides farming, he ended up doing a lot of landscaping and other botanical work. Unfortunately, the drought hit, and that work dried up as well. So he ended up having to take a lot of odd jobs, and perhaps this part is best heard from Matt himself. Matt?
Whoa, am I on the TV?
Yes, you are, Matt.
Hey, yeah. I was out of work for quite a while, and then I started pet sitting. And the last job that I had was pet sitting for Chelsea Handler's pot-bellied pigs. And it didn't pay as well as you think. But anyway, those pigs, they were eating better than me. And one day I was like, duh, like, my dad has a farm, like, where he grows food and stuff. And I was like, all his hired hands, they all got paid pretty good and ate pretty well, so I thought I'd probably eat better than that than these pigs are here in Hollywood. So I swallowed up some pride, and then I hitched onto the 101, and then onto the 10, and then to the 405, until I eventually made my way back to Martinsville.
Juan, will you ask Matt, how did the family react to his unexpected return?
Oh yeah, Matt, how did the family react?
Oh, well, my dad, he was pretty happy about it, It was like he saw me halfway down the lane and he ran out to meet me, and then he saw that my shoes were falling apart, and he was like, took off his shoes and he handed it to him and said, "You are always with me. What is mine is yours." And then he was like, "We're going to have a party and a pork roast, and we're going to invite everybody from Martinsville here." But my brother, Jake, he wasn't so happy about it.
Why not?
well, he felt like I had betrayed the family, which I can kind of understand because he stayed at home in Martinsville and worked on the farm and was working really hard while I was out attending Hollywood parties and trying to make my break in film. And even being in Hollywood, this is the first time I've been on the TV. But Dad said to him, you know, we didn't think your brother, we'd ever see him again, and yet here he is. And it's just a miracle that we have our family member back, so why wouldn't we celebrate?
And there you have it. A farming family, an unexpected reunion, and maybe, just maybe, a lesson or two. For WNTY Unity News, this is Juan Levitt in Martinsville on the road. Back to you, Bob.
Thank you, Juan. Story sounds familiar. The prodigal son is a beloved story, and I know some people aren't as familiar with the Bible as others. And it's from the Gospel of Luke, 15th chapter, the 11th through 32nd verse. And thank you, Michael Davis and Ed Trout. They wrote that, came up with the idea for doing it for me. Now, many people, look at the story and they go, oh, wow, the unconditional love of the Father. And here the Father was ready to forgive him for anything he had done, didn't even ask questions. But to understand it at a deeper level, a metaphysical, symbolic level, we turn to the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary. Now, in the Bible, all male characters represent our thinking nature, and all female characters represent our feeling nature. So all of these characters in the Bible, even though we might, say we see these various characters, they're all actually within us, aspects of our own self. So this is the story of one person, the story of you, or the story of me, dealing with different aspects of our thoughts, of our feelings. Being willing to, once again, recognize the awareness, the wholeness that I was touching on a few minutes ago. It's all a process of self-realization, of building consciousness, awareness that we're spiritual beings having a human experience. Now, it's interesting that in the Bible story, there are no names assigned to these characters. It's just a father and these two sons. So if there's a name, and you look in the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary, you can see that if the character is named, then we can understand for certain what they were supposed to represent. Like all characters named John represent the thought of love, and all characters named Mary are the feeling of love. So our thinking nature at its highest level is wisdom. And the Father does symbolize that Christ consciousness within us, that divinity, that place where we always know that God is with us, that God is there. Misled by our following five senses, though, or by following our five senses, though, we go out into the world sometimes and we forget. Or sometimes we've never awakened to it, especially when we're younger. We're just out there learning how to survive. So we do the things that a lot of times society teaches us to do. Climb the ladder to success. Purchase the things that we desire. Have a good time. And as I mentioned before, in the Old Testament, we see this over and over again, where people are thrown out of their comfort zone, starting with one of the very first stories, Adam and Eve. The prodigal son represents that inner rebel. He's asleep to his spiritual being a human experience, and he's all about his five senses: seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching. Every individual goes through the prodigal stage, right? There's at some point where you just, you're out there doing this. So it's not that you say another person is a prodigal. No, you've got the prodigal within you. That part of you that doesn't want to follow the rules. Or that part of you that wants to try it without the rules. It's a necessary part of our growth. Long before Wheel of Fortune was a game show, it was a symbol of that if you're going to ride the rim of the wheel, there are going to be times you're on top, and there are times you're going to be on the bottom. There are going to be times where you're sailing downward, and other times where you're rising upward. So to truly know who we are, we must first experience who we are not. And that often is an unpleasant experience. Now, that older brother, the one who is resentful when the younger brother came home, represents that conforming part of us. We all know what the rules are, and we all know what we should be doing, especially if those rules were laid out for us in a religious setting. We must do it the right way. Yet this part of us sometimes feels restricted, right? You know, it's like we're hemmed in because this is the way we have to do it. Not because we want to do it, we have to do it. So consider that inner battle, and I got a kick out of, you know, here on Friday, there's a movie that's getting fantastic reviews, one of the best reviewed movies probably over the last year, and that's the new Disney Pixar movie, Inside Out. I haven't seen it yet, but you think of that within us, we have sometimes these polar opposites. We have the adult and the child. We have the mature and the immature. And the problem with the parent part of us is sometimes that parent part of us can link up with that follow the rules kind of attitude. Be prudish, moralistic, and naughty, naughty, naughty. But there's a mature part of us that's a divinity within, which recognizes, yes, sometimes we need to try all of these various things. You know, a child really doesn't understand the meaning of the word hot until the child touches the hot stove. And then he gets it. This thing's hot. I don't want to touch this anymore. So consider that the older son may not have literally left home, but he left the Christ consciousness. Instead of suffering lack, he suffered from bondage. He suffered from an obligation to things that he really wasn't feeling he wanted to do. The younger son goes out to win the game of materialistic accumulation. You know, we all have to stroke our ego from time to time. The rugged individual, I'm doing it all on my own. If you're not already awake to your spirituality, you might say, well, we don't need no stinking spirituality. We're going to do it on our own. So we fight the way to the top, and sometimes we argue that the ends justify the means. But what we learn, hopefully learn, earlier in our life rather than later, is that instead of getting something from the world, we first must give something to the world. Instead of getting something from the world, we must first give something to the world. And that is our creativity, our special gifts, passions, and talents, the things that we do so well. The reason why we are here is to express those talents, to help other people, and to make this world a better place. There needs to be a balance in the physical world, so you reap what you sow. The amount of energy you put out is going to be the amount of energy that's going to come back to you multiplied. So, the younger son loses his self-worth. He comes to, quote-unquote, no want, as it says in this story. Consider, though, that this could be either a lack of all the things that he needs for his daily life, or it could be accumulating more than enough, more than you'd ever need, but discovering that there's still an emptiness there. Is this all there is? You know, you get to the point where you feel like you've accomplished, but you're like, I still don't feel any fulfillment. What is the meaning of life? The meaning of life can only be found from within. Instead of asking yourself, what is the meaning of life, ask yourself, what would give my life meaning? So when we forget that we're spiritual beings having a human experience, we demonstrate a crisis in our life. It'll come in one of the areas of our life. It'll come in our health, our occupation, our relationships, our financial supply, or just a disconnect from God. Well, we don't really disconnect from God, but we do hang up the phone. You know, the line is still there. It's just a matter of we're just not aware. We've fallen asleep to it again. In the Gospel of John, 5th chapter, 19th verse, Jesus says, I of myself can do nothing. It is the Father within me and through me that does the works. And that's another affirmation for us. I can't do anything on my own. But if I'm willing to open my mind to the divine ideas, the divine guidance that's always there, then I can do marvelous things. And remember what I say about divine ideas? Only two things you need to do. One is believe that divine ideas exist. So we open your mind to the divine idea. And then be willing to express the divine ideas that you know in your heart are right for you to do. Success does not come from getting there. It comes from earning the right to be there. So the younger son ends up feeding hogs. Now pigs and hogs in our Bible represent, or they're symbols of human life at its lowest ebb. Lowest possible relationship to life. And of course, if a person is following Jewish law, you're not supposed to eat pork. So regardless of whether a person is rich or poor, there's this feeling of emptiness, that there's no meaning. But then there's an important line, and in the 17th verse it says, "But when he came to himself, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have bread enough and to spare, but I must perish here with hunger?'" When he came to himself. A lot of people who are in that situation would rather just blame other people, right? But he changes his mind. He repents. The root of the word repent actually means change your way of thinking, change your belief system. So when someone says to you, repent, say, rather than some sort of a shaming, an accusation. It's kind of like in AA, you know, when someone who's an alcoholic or has some substance abuse problem finally gets to the point where they realize, I have got a problem, and I'm not sure what to do. I need help. So he comes to himself. He comes back to the realization that, oh yeah, I am a spiritual being having a human experience. There is a spiritual concept, and that is that the most important part of learning is to unlearn the old belief systems that no longer work for us. So we realize that we're a spiritual being having a human experience. Now there's a word that's been severely abused in recent years, and that is the word freedom. The freedom to do. There was a German philosopher who lived from 1759 to 1805. His name was Friedrich Schiller. He was actually a good friend of Goethe, who of course is better known. I'm going to ask Jesse to put up a slide, because I think this is a very powerful quote. And it's one I've kept in mind when I hear people grouse about they're losing their freedom. Freedom is not just doing what one wants, but becoming what one must. So we follow divine guidance. We do what is ours to do. And we notice that in this parable, the Father is unmoved. The Father doesn't stop the Son from leaving. He's always centered. So that is that divine part within us that we can always turn to. It's always available for us. Now some people say, why isn't God doing anything? Well, God is doing something through you. We are the eyes of God. We are the hands of God and the feet of God. God gives us free will, but we have to allow God to be God through us. A building can have electrical service, but until somebody throws a switch, there's not going to be any light. And swinging a bat at the darkness or cursing the darkness isn't going to make it leave. So when the younger son changes his mind, he begins to rehearse a speech. And I've been there. It's like, you know you're going to have a confrontation with somebody, and so you kind of rehearse what it is you're going to go through. And the son says, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants." There's a flaw, though, in this attitude. Can you figure out what it is? All you need to do is to read 2 more verses on to the 21st verse. I'm going to have Jesse put up the slide. Thank you, Jesse. So when he gets to his father, he says, "Father, I have sinned against you, against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." So what's missing? Treat me as one of your hired servants. if we're still in that mode of feeling like we're not worthy, or feeling like we need to be totally subservient, then we haven't quite got it. That we are a child of God, and that means that we are empowered with the powers of God. We have to give up the need to punish ourselves or believe that we don't deserve anything. Okay, thank you, Jesse. And then in the 22nd verse, the father said to his servants, "Bring quickly the best robe, put it on him, put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet." The robe is a symbol of a new self-image, that indeed this son is worthy. A ring declares authority so that all may know that he is part of a royal family. And then shoes. Whenever we have feet described in the Bible, it means understanding. So by putting new shoes on your feet, you have a totally new understanding that you're a spiritual being having a human experience and fully understand the meaning of that. But then, of course, there's the older brother. Now, we've already talked about him. He has to follow the rules. And sometimes we're too religious to be spiritual, or we're too holy to be human. Behind the facade of righteousness, the son was experiencing jealousy, bitterness, resentment. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. He worked hard all of these years, and where did it get me? Well, where did he expect it to get you? Why do you do what you're doing? If you do what you're doing in a true attitude of service to others, then you won't get caught up like this brother did. He forgot that he was a spiritual being having a human experience. Now, there's an interesting sidebar to this story. It's always kind of good to look at the context. A few verses before this story, in the 15th chapter of Luke, you'll find out that Jesus is being questioned by the Pharisees. Now, the Pharisees were a group of people that felt that they needed to strictly adhere to religious rules. And they would use their wealth and their power to influence the politicians of their day to follow the rules the way they think the rules should be followed. Good thing we've learned in 2,000 years we don't have any people like that in the world anymore. But then I'll have Jesse put up the slide. Of course, the most powerful thing is when he is talking to the older son, and he's feeling the resentment, and he's saying, "Oh, Dad, I did all this work, and you didn't give me a party." And the father says, "Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours." You're always with me. God is always with you, and whatever is God's is yours. This is something we all need to embrace and live. The younger son dropped the servant consciousness. And the older brother also needs to drop the servant consciousness. God has already forgiven you for everything and anything you've ever done. And I know for certain that there's at least one person in this sanctuary this morning that is still beating himself or herself up over something from the past. Let it go. You are forgiven. You need to forgive yourself. So within each of us, we need to have a balance. We need to have the part of us that follows the rules. We also need to have the part of us that recognize there are times we don't have to follow the rules. There are times we do need to buckle down and work hard, and there are other times we need to have fun. I know recently we were talking to a mother who had just gotten so caught up in the role of being the mother that she hadn't taken any time to just relax and have fun. Wouldn't have imagined allowing somebody else to watch her child even for an hour. The Father is always there, the Christ consciousness, regardless of what we've done. Can we get started now? Can we move forward? Is what the Christ consciousness often says to us when we finally have that awakening and come back, when we've had our time of loose living. So this is your story. We all can return to the center. We all can return to the center. And when we do, it's time to throw a party. We can have a celebration within us where we can once again eat, drink, and be merry. To once again acknowledge Father's Day, our closing story is a 3-minute video from Steve Hartman of the CBS Evening News about someone who was lost but now is found.
Generally speaking, if you're a kid growing up in Pittsburgh, like Jesse and Josh Lyon, the last place you ever want to be is in a courtroom across the table from Detective Jack Mook. Mook is a by-the-book, no-nonsense, chew-em-up, spit-em-out, 22-year veteran of the force. Outside of work, he's a committed bachelor, a man's man, who would never so much as let a Vidalia see his soft side. For fun, he hits people and volunteers at the Steel City Boxing Gym, teaching the sport to underprivileged kids.
Most of the kids that come in this gym are street kids.
I'm not going to hurt you.
Many of them have been born into poverty.
Kids like 11-year-old Jesse and his 15-year-old brother, Josh. Long before their date in court, Jack had been working with them.
Turn that hand.
He really liked these kids and knew the feeling was mutual.
Turn that hand.
So when they just stopped showing up at the gym one day, Jack went out and found the older boy.
And he looked terrible. Bags under his eyes, 12 years old.
And he was asking me about it, and then I just cried.
What Jack didn't know, what no one knew till that moment, was just how bad these kids had it. They were in a foster home with foster parents who Jack says were extremely abusive and neglectful.
They have had it as worse as any other kid that's ever lived in the city of Pittsburgh, living conditions-wise.
Really?
And that just, I had enough of it.
So Jack Mook took matters into his own hands, cashed in some favors, and got the kids placed in a new home.
You want something else to eat?
His.
I slept the best I ever did that night.
Jack has been their foster parent for almost 2 years now. And for this tough guy detective, it's still quite a transition. He says the homework alone is brutal.
I'm relearning prepositions and declarative statements, and this is right up your alley. I have no idea what this kid's talking about. Don't you got a dictionary thing on there?
And homework is just the beginning of this bachelor's rebranding.
I'm in here trying to learn my culinary skills, brother.
But I get the sense that you're really loving this.
Yeah, yes. It's awesome. It's the best thing I ever did in my life.
At least it was the best thing.
That's it.
Until this week, when he went to court and did one better.
He'll be successful.
Adopted the
All right,
boys
come on, guys.
and made them mooks.
You're Mook, right? You happy? Good. Now you're gonna go home and cut my grass.
Safe to say the thought of chores has never been more welcome. Steve Hartman, on the road, in Pittsburgh.
From the Gospel of Luke, 15th chapter, 31st verse. And the Father said to him, Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. And may you always be open to God's guidance and grace. It is now time for our tithes and offerings. It's good to keep in mind that for 100 years, this has been a place where people discover and live their spiritual purpose and potential. So take what it is you're going to give today. If you choose to give electronically on the Unity of Indy website, on the donation tab, just hold the amount that you're giving there in mind. Otherwise, just hold your check or your cash in your hand and know that whatever we give unconditionally and lovingly comes back to us multiplied. So you open our heart and pour love into our offering. Then let's say the affirmation on the screen together. Divine love through me blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I give,